Welcome back to the Becoming Her podcast. You guys, Dr. Ann and I are here again today, and we're excited to chat. It's funny because I usually give Ann the topic that we're going to talk about like 5 minutes before we start recording. And I'm like, "You're good." She's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm great." So when we talk about the fact that this podcast is just so free flowing and it is meant for you to feel like you're sitting in a chair with us, drinking a cup of coffee, and we're just having a very open conversation. And today we're going to be talking about we're meshing two things that I'm passionate about all of these things, but I'm super passionate on the hormone side and super passionate on the brain wiring side. And we're going to mesh these two things together. And we're going to talk about how declining hormones as menopause hits and we start to lose these hormones, how that impacts your confidence, your body image, and how that really impacts the brain and the wiring upstairs. And I know that this is something that every single female struggles with, yet it's not talked about enough, is the impact that that has when you start to lose your confidence. So, Anne, I'd be curious, is that feeling just emotional or like what's really happening upstairs when we start to experience this?
Well, it's multifaceted. And part of what we had talked about before we decided to record this was the region of the brain that's actually responsible, which is called the insula, the region of the brain that's actually responsible for emotion integration with body sensations and self-awareness. And so there is a component of ourselves where our bodies actually communicating to us something that's awry. So let's say, as an example, you're really tired. The body's going to give all these clues to you, very much like if you're dehydrated or if you're hungry.
Hmm.
We get all these clues from the body to let us know that it needs food or it needs water, it needs hydration. Well, the same thing happens when there's something going on inside of it, when we're sick, when our hormones aren't right. And there's a level of interoception, in other words, an ability for us to take in like be aware of what's happening internally for us, that actually occurs. Think of it almost like a sixth sense, if you will, where this part of the brain that's responsible for integration is actually noticing that something's off. And so noticing something that is off, but then not being able to put my finger on it means then by default, I have to create stories around this, but also now I'm responding to what's happening to me. So there was and I'll share just an example from one of my close friends recently who is undergoing menopause, and like I'm already on the other side of it. And she's talking about how she's starting to get night sweats and suddenly has heart palpitations and panic and is having these anxiety attacks, and she doesn't understand what's happening. And she said, I've never experienced anything quite like this my entire life. What's going on? And fortunately for me, because I do what I do and I know what I know, I was able to kind of guide her through and say, well, this is a really common symptom of perimenopause. This is for some women, having our estrogen shoot up and come down. Your body is understanding, like it knows that something is happening inside of it. But if I can't put my finger on it, I'm just going to get more anxious about it. And if I can't put my finger on it long enough, and I stay in that anxiety too much, depression is going to be the next result of that because
Mhm.
of essentially emotionally, we move into a place of learned helplessness, if you will. Um, and so it's kind of multifaceted and multi-pronged because we're not taking in cues from our body, and then we don't have a capacity to understand it effectively. And because of that, we're having really strong emotional reactions, as well as simply having emotional reactions because our body is on this roller coaster of hormones.
The peaks and the valleys are insane. The panic attacks and anxiety, I resonate so hard with that. That has been one of the hardest symptoms. Outside, I finally fixed the sleep thing because when my progesterone started to decline and the lack of sleep, I mean, that flipped my whole world upside down. But between progesterone and magnesium every single night, solid nutrition, all of those things, I finally have that under control. But the anxiety and panic attacks, I've never experienced them in my entire life. And I had one when we were actually on our honeymoon. And we were, we're in Europe and the roads are just so narrow. And we were on this bus and there was like 50 people on this bus. And so we were doing a cruise. And so they were taking us from the cruise port into like the little town. And I couldn't see out because I was just surrounded by people I couldn't see out. There was like 50 people on this bus. I was in this super tight, confined space. And I remember telling Matt, I was just like shaking. And I couldn't breathe. I quite literally
Mhm.
was struggling to get air. And I was like, get me off this bus. Get me off this bus. You need to get me off this bus right now. And he's like, babe, what do you want me to do? He's like, do you want to, like, where do I pull? Like, there is nothing I can do. And I refused to get on a bus after that. I was like, we'll take a taxi. I don't care what, we're not doing that again. But it quite literally is, you nailed it. It becomes not just frustrating, but it's daunting when
Mhm.
these shifts are happening and you have no idea what's going on and you start to feel crazy. So, no, you're not crazy. It's rewiring is happening. You're losing hormones, rewiring is happening. And estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they talk to your brain every single day. And when estrogen specifically starts to drop, I know that that's going to impact chemicals. And I'd love for you to dive into this, like serotonin, dopamine, your GABA. So dive into that for us because I love geeking out on this and I love geeking out on this stuff with you. So I'd love for you to like just talk to everybody about what's going on there.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that sometimes those of us that are highly anxious and neurotic anyway, we actually
Not me.
have
What are you talking about?
not trying to speak to Nicole during this podcast. We actually have shorter response for our serotonin. When that serotonin is that feel good neurotransmitter that's responsible for anxiety, sometimes depression, and so I'm trying not to make this too complicated. So when we're struggling with anxiety, what happens on a chemical level is that there isn't enough serotonin in what is known in this is the synaptic cleft. So the synaptic cleft is from neurons to neurons. There's this space between them that then think of it almost like having lubrication between those spots,
Mm,
that if I can get the lubrication really good, then that energy flows really nicely. And when I don't have enough serotonin, the essentially that impulse is not flowing nicely. There's an interruption. And so when we do things like take SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, what happens is that it inhibits the serotonin that's supposed to go like going elsewhere into that synaptic cleft. So now hopefully we have more serotonin and better transmission.
mm,
Well, when we have multiple varying roller coasters of estrogen and testosterone, everything goes kittywampus. Our serotonin goes low, and if we're already neurotic and anxious, not only do we naturally have less serotonin, but we also have less serotonin that is produced. We have less serotonin in that cleft, and we
mhm,
have less serotonin, smaller amounts of serotonin that's naturally produced. Not because there's something wrong with us. We're not broken. You're not destined for a life of living on Prozac. That's not what I'm saying. But we already have a deficit. And then you want to throw into that mix changes in estrogen and testosterone. And that throws down serotonin even harder and also impacts dopamine. So, and I like to say that there's a lot of people that are highly anxious that also have ADHD. And if you want to reference one of our prior podcasts on ADHD, ADHD is a dopamine seeking brain. So it's already a brain that is low in dopamine.
mm. And practically diagnosed me with ADHD on that podcast. FYI, you guys, it was quite interesting. I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to that one. But squirrel.
It was a fun podcast. And what that means then is that we have what's known as dopamine seeking brains. In other words, we're trying to get dopamine in because we don't have enough on a just a very
Mm,
basic, very literal level. And so we will do things like seek after alcohol or sugary sweets or novel experiences. Those are the healthiest forms to get that dopamine rush. Well, ironically, hormones go out of balance. Guess what else goes out of balance? Dopamine. And so you're already neurotic. We have little serotonin, not enough's being produced already before perimenopause and menopause. And then we potentially have lower levels of dopamine if we have ADHD or complex trauma. That's another reason why dopamine goes low in the brain. And we get these shifts then in dopamine and serotonin. So literally the dopamine in that feel good neurotransmitter, I now am not experiencing joy to an extent that my brain and my body need to experience joy and happiness. I can't get those feel good hormones that occur for me. Kind of like when you go and you exercise really well and you feel like relieved after it. For those
mhm,
of us that exercise and get that rush, that endorphin rush, it would be like exercising and not getting the endorphin rush, just the pain of the exercise. That's it. Just
mhm.
like, oh, that was miserable. I'm not going to do that again.
Yep. And I want to point out here because you made a really great point when hormones are quote unquote out of balance. And what I really want you ladies to understand and take away from this podcast is that, and I speak to this often, but perimenopause, your hormones are doing this. It has peaks and its valleys, particularly with your estrogen, progesterone's on a steep decline. But when menopause hits, we are not producing these hormones anymore. So, actual full blown menopause, you've hit the day of menopause, you stop producing these key hormones. And so, this isn't just a matter of, I don't feel like myself anymore. It is not just in your head, it's literally in your brain chemistry as well. And the most
Mhm.
underlooked aspect of menopause, I truly feel like, is the effect that it has on your mental health. And it's because this part of it is not talked about enough. And I would like for you to dive into why dopamine matters so much in the confidence that we feel, those dopamine
Well,
hits.
yes. So dopamine hits and what they give us. Think of it almost like a bubble underwater. So it's literally air pockets for us. But when we have enough dopamine in our brain and when we're operating with and think of dopamine as uh, well, the high after exercise, that's endorphin rush, but also some dopamine that we get from that, dopamine that we get after sugary sweets. Like it kind of relieves the body. It makes us feel internally at peace when we get enough dopamine in the brain.
Mm,
So, and the brain is wired for homeostasis. And so, what happens then is that if we don't have enough dopamine in the brain and then we go and do something that produces anxiety for us or is a challenge for us, it's going to naturally impact how confident we feel simply
mhm,
because already we're starting behind the eight ball, if you will, when we're doing something that requires us to be confident. Um, and what I just want to speak to this really quickly because I hear a lot of women that will come into my office and then just say, this is what middle age looks like. This is what menopause looks like. Maybe
mhm.
they've taken hormones or birth control that they were given by their doctor. It didn't do anything for them. So they just said, this is how my life's going to be. I'm going to have no sex drive. I'm going to have poor metabolism, no energy. My skin's going to be dry. Everything's going to like,
I
and
basically am going to
I've
feel like
got
dog
brain
doo doo for
fog.
the rest of my days.
Yes.
Yes.
And we accept it as just a fact of life. And I think sometimes there are physicians that mean well but don't know better that also communicate that to us that we just need to accept it. This is what middle age looks like. This is what it looks like in postmenopause and perimenopause. Yep, that's just the season that you're in. Yep, that's just what happens. Um, and I think the reason why I get so passionate about it and it hurts my heart so much is that if you went in midlife and you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, if you were diagnosed with arthritis, if you were like any situation, any condition whatsoever, we would do everything in our power to make ourselves feel better. And I don't mean that we're necessarily getting to the same level of functioning that we were before, but at a bare minimum, we're going to control the symptoms of that.
Mhm.
And there are so many women that have bought into this lie that the rest of their life they have to feel horrible and they have to be tired and have no sex drive and have no energy and have a horrendous brain fog and not be able to manage their life on a day-to-day basis. And it's completely treatable. It absolutely is. And you can feel a million times better and more confident in your body, more confident in your skin, have an ability to track information without getting rattled. Uh, have a sex drive, enjoy life again, have the energy to enjoy life again. And we settle because we simply tell ourselves or we've been told that this is just how it has to be.
I I love that you brought this up, and I want to also link this because I was having a conversation a couple days ago in my DMs, and I was talking to a gal, and she's really struggling. She's like in the thick of perimenopause right now, and she's like, "I'm so frustrated." And we just talked about this on a couple podcasts ago with our Q&A. But she's like, "It's like my husband doesn't understand, but I don't get why. It's like, why am I struggling with this, and he's totally fine? It's like we're both the same age, but he doesn't have any of these same symptoms." And the reality is, you guys, is men don't have the same fluctuating hormones. They have one, testosterone,
Mhm.
and it quite literally controls them, right? It controls these same emotions and these feelings that we as females have. But if a male were to go into his provider and he's like, look, doc, I'm not sleeping, my sex drive's kind of low, I don't have as much energy, something's off, that provider is writing a prescription for testosterone before he can even finish spitting out what he's saying. A
Yep.
female goes in with the exact same symptoms: anxiousness, irritability, overwhelmed, low sex drive, gaining weight rapidly. And quite literally, these symptoms for a lot of females are just swept underneath the rug. And the women the Women's Health Initiative did us dirty with that study done multiple years ago in regards to hormones, synthetic or specifically synthetic hormones, i.e.,
Yep.
synthetic estrogen, which is horse urine. You're putting horse urine into your body if you're utilizing synthetic estrogen. And providers, unfortunately, are still practicing with that same outdated advice. And so, as Anne mentioned, you don't have to struggle. It doesn't have to be this way. And I am just as passionate about this part of it because women hear about menopause, and menopause itself is one day. They don't understand that. It's one day. You've hit menopause 12 consecutive months without a period. The day after that, congratulations, you're in menopause. The day after that is postmenopause. So we hear all of this, hype in and around menopause, but there's very little support or education when it comes to perimenopause. And perimenopause is when your hormones are they're fluctuating. They're up, they're down, they're left, they're right. One minute you feel great. The next minute you're like, nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I think I'm going to go eat worms. And it feels like this roller coaster that you just don't know how to get off of. And it typically tends that when women actually hit the day of menopause, more providers are at that point willing to try and help and support. But perimenopause is just kind of left out into the wind of like, there's not enough information out there, there's not enough education. And so perimenopause can start 10 years leading into the actual day of menopause. So women are spending years and years and years feeling like a stranger in their own skin, absolute dog doo doo, confused, overwhelmed, anxious, and quite honestly, just really pissed off because their
Mhm.
whole world, their whole body has flipped upside down and there's little support and little education to help. And so really understanding that this isn't just this isn't just a I'm being, overly emotional. This is quite literally your whole system is being thrown for a loop. And there's so much support out there, but understanding specifically what's going on here is it's a big, big piece of this of being able to educate yourself. The more you can educate yourself, the more that you can advocate for yourself. So did you have something to say to that, Anne?
I do. Actually, and I wanted to say this isn't new, women. So way back, before we got into modern civilization, women were constantly diagnosed with hysteria, and it was
Mm,
in relationship to high degrees of anxiety that were experienced throughout the woman's life. And sometimes this was related to actual changes in estrogen, things in relationship to their periods, pregnancy, perimenopause, and women were actually institutionalized for hysteria. And so when you think about like us as females coming from being institutionalized, literally put in a home with other crazy folks, um, because I'm highly anxious or I'm struggling with variations in estrogen. And today we learned how to silence a lot of our anxiety. We learned how to package ourselves and look really good on the outside. And we've been doing this for generations. And so when we go in and we hear you're just anxious, we accept it. When we go in and we hear this is just a part of life, we accept it.
mhm.
And it's not that we remember being institutionalized. None of us were alive during that time, but rather we had this generational pattern that we pass down throughout our families of learning how to stay silent about things that are actually making us miserable. And the reason why I just want to point this out is that I think we turn to physicians, we turn to healthcare providers, assuming that they are going to have answers for us. And we really want to trust them because they're good people with
Yeah.
big hearts that are in the field for like for lots of really wonderful reasons. But at the end of the day, if they're not giving you an answer that does not fit or resonate for you and it doesn't solve your problems or you don't like the answer, you are your best advocate.
Hmm.
You being able to say, I'm unwilling to settle. And it doesn't matter if you have to go to one provider or 10 providers, eventually you can find someone that will side with you, that will be able to say and explain things to you that makes such a difference in how you actually show up for yourself and how we manage these symptoms.
And that is the amazing part of social media, utilizing social media in its power for that. I believe there are so many providers, creators, coaches out there that really do want to break this down to you in a way of which that you can understand. And there's so much more ways to educate, to be able to advocate for yourself these days. So taking your power back there, and of course, following the providers that when a content creator, a coach that you're following is full of a line of BS, or if they're authentic and they know what they're talking about. So I would encourage you to follow more of those providers. Your gut's going, or creators, I guess I should say, is going to tell you that. But there is, again, so much. We talked about the cons of social media in our last podcast, but there is a lot of pros of social media as well. And I feel like
Mhm.
this is a big one just because there's more women now that are finally educating and advocating for themselves because they see now these, big trends that are going on. And we are truly starting to dive more into menopause itself and the effects on with hormones and declining hormones. And that is something I know that the menopause board has recently updated some of their statistics and their stats, and we're starting to see, and there's more information and research out there regarding particularly bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And we're starting to throw, all of the negative stigma out with hormone replacement therapy, especially estrogen for females when it comes to, again, yes, these studies were done. We saw negative effects, but that was done in synthetic hormones. We do not have any studies that showed the same negative effects in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And so we're starting to educate and advocate more for that because again, you don't have to suffer. You just don't. And there's a part of this, there's a massive part of this, and we're going to talk about this here in a second because this goes into the rewiring of the brain and feeding your brain those healthy things, like Anne said, these habits that we're going to dive into. And you guys hear us talk about these often. But there's a big part of this that you're going to have to own your piece, like when it comes to your nutrition, your training, your movement, because there is no amount of hormones. If you feel like dog doo doo right now, you're anxious, you're irritable, you're overwhelmed, your sex drive's gone, you're not sleeping well, there is no amount of hormones. If you're not doing the work on your end with the lifestyle piece of it, that is going to quote unquote fix this for you. You might feel slightly better, sure, but you can't slap a patch on it, expect to drop 20 pounds overnight, and that all of your symptoms are just going to magically disappear. It doesn't work that way. And I would even argue to say that your body will not respond to these hormones if you're not doing what you, as well as they could, if you're not doing what you need to do on your end with the inflammation piece alone. And inflammation is directly related to your lifestyle, how you feel your body, how you move your body, how you treat your body. And so understand that, yes, you play a massive role here, but replacing these hormones as they start to decline is one of the biggest pieces of you not just looking your best, but feeling your best. And that part gets overshadowed by the, I just want to look as good as I possibly can. And most women, it's unfortunate, but most women start hormone replacement therapy because they think it's a fat loss strategy. I get that every single day in my DMs, Nicole, but you don't understand. I'm on hormones. I still can't lose weight. And it's like, because girlfriend, hormones, we don't take hormones to lose weight. We take hormones to feel like ourselves again. We take
Yes.
hormones to, they're gone. They're declining to replace them, to feel as good as we used to, which dramatically impacts how we show up, which dramatically impacts this whole fat loss gig, right? But they're not a fat loss strategy in themselves. And I guess if that is enough to get women at least interested in the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and they can start to experience the positive effects. But if most women are only taking hormone replacement therapy and they go into a provider because they want to lose weight and that provider is doing that for them because they want to lose weight, but yet not explaining what they really do. A big part of you responding to your hormone replacement therapy is working with somebody who truly understands how to dose it, how to administer it, what to look for, and how all of these hormones play a role. And what I'm seeing more and more these days is that a lot of providers, and again, I'm not throwing stones, I'm not throwing shade, they just don't know what they don't know, but they are prescribing hormones without any sort of lab work. And what I'm seeing, Anna, I don't know if you see this but it's crazy to me. It's like, well, I went to my provider and they gave me estrogen and I still don't feel better. These women aren't in full blown menopause. They were not prescribed progesterone. And I'm like, why are you on estrogen? I can guarantee you, if you're in the thick of perimenopause, you don't need estrogen, you need progesterone. We need to bring that up. And so there's just still a lot of maybe mispractice is the word that I'm looking for here when it comes to just not quite understanding how all of these hormones connect and what really needs to happen to get you feeling your best. So this is where working with a hormone specialist is going to come into play. And for a lot of you, and Anne's dove into this with her experience, that's not your PCP. It's not your OBGYN. And they just, to their defense, weren't trained on this. This isn't what they went to medical school for. So this has just been something that's been fallen into their lap because you're my doctor. You should know how to fix this. But it's no different than, again, I always say if you needed open heart surgery, you're not going to go to your PCP for that, right? You're going to go to a cardiologist because that's what they do. That's what they specialize in.
Well, and I always like pointing out that I think that there are a lot of really smart people out there that were trained with a specific methodology and in a system that does not support having full conversations and
Mm,
full follow-up. And so in very often in Western medicine, and you want to use your insurance, I get it. I want to use my insurance for a lot of stuff too. I'm not independently wealthy. And we want to go in and we want to get all of our needs met by this one person, but they've got maybe on at max 15 minutes to spend with us. And so they're all about symptom management,
hmm
not because they don't mean well, but that is what they've been trained to do. And we go in with the expectation that we're going to get, essentially what would take an hour, maybe, or half an hour, multiple appointments together, of diving into what's happening. And we're not going to get that. This is not a one stop fits all kind of mentality. Any one pill, any one shot, any one hormone, if it fixes your weight loss, then your eating plan and your exercise routine was not the issue ever.
hmm
But often it's a combination of all of these things.
Yep.
But again, as we get really busy. I think as women, we get into these different phases of life of raising our children, of trying to take care of the house and the career, and we are chronically on the back burner,
hmm
always for our own needs, even self-care or exercise or eating well. And we're eating chicken nuggets and French fries. I have nothing against chicken and nuggets and French fries, but we are doing default, and we're not actually showing up well for ourselves. And so by the time we hit middle age and we start noticing the symptoms of these years and years of neglecting ourselves, we aren't going to be able to go in and get one thing and get it to fix everything. And if you have that mentality, that is very much American mentality. I mean, the number of people that want to come in and see me for like a month and then be better, or go into a doctor and
hmm
get a pill and now their depression is, or the number of times that I hear people come in with a stage of life, something that they're going through in their life, and they say, I went to the psychiatrist, I think my meds need to be adjusted. If I had a nickel for every time that somebody was going through some stressor, and they said, I think my medications aren't working and I need them adjusted.
mm
And it's constantly going back to, this is a season in life, this is a moment in time. It's not, the pill is not going to fix your grief. A medication isn't going to fix anxiety when you have something that you're really anxious about. It's not supposed to.
Yeah.
We can't numb out these experiences, but that goes back to not being able to take in what our body's communicating to us and then know what to do with it.
Yep. There's so much power to that. And the amount, I think that's become the normal, is to numb us out. There should be a pill, there should be some sort of prescription that I can take that's going to fix this. And there's very little, and I've talked about this in previous podcasts, and I can just go off. So I'm just going to side note, but there is an obesity epidemic and there's a mental health crisis. And we could quite literally cut both of these epidemics to a fraction of what they were if we were to combine lifestyle and hormone replacement therapy. And we would get to the root of both of those things, which would dramatically impact how you look, how you feel, how you show up for the rest of your days. And so let's talk about, Anne, with, I think, the most, I guess, impactful part of the brain, and just where I really love geeking out because it's so interesting to me, is that we can quite literally rewire our brain. We have the ability to be able to do that, which is crazy. But as these hormones start to decline, this is something we need to be really mindful of as women going through this stage. As our hormones start to decline, and these hormones talk to our brain every single day, and so when we stop producing them, then obviously that impacts. I would love for you to talk about the stress center in the brain, because that's obviously impacted. And when it comes to feeling like a stranger in our own body, what we can do, we're going to dive into the lifestyle piece of this, but what we can start to do to work through this as we rewire and remap our brain to think and function how we want it to.
Mm. I love that you said that, because I was just about going to stop you to talk about that exact phenomenon.
We're in
Um,
sync here. I love
I love
it.
it. Look, we didn't need to actually have more than
We
five
don't
minutes to
need
discuss
notes. What are you
this.
talking about?
Um, so what is really cool about how the brain is structured? And the amygdala is the feeling center, and it's in response to that limbic drive and the limbic system that we have that kind of floods us with lots of chemicals when we go into panic or when we get really angry. Well, what's
Mm,
really interesting, I'll use the example of anger, because anger is something that I think, anger or anxiety, anything that has a very strong emotional reaction, okay? Essentially the amygdala hijacks the entire brain, and it says, like, okay, all hands on deck, and if you express that anger or anxiety, And I don't mean express it in a way that we're getting relief from it, but essentially I get mad at somebody or I stay anxious and I'm like, this is going to be awful. I can't do this. This is going to be too much. Okay. What happens is that my prefrontal cortex shrinks, and the prefrontal cortex is responsible for thinking and cognition. Okay.
Mm,
But if I deny that, if instead of just getting angry, I withstand that, instead of just rolling over in bed and sleeping for another hour instead of getting up and going to the gym, when I learn self-discipline, when I learn that ability to not respond to all of the cues in my brain and doing everything on a whim, my prefrontal cortex literally grows. It gets bigger.
that's interesting. That's crazy.
A- And so when we have these moments, and this is why consistency is the real MVP of anything that we do in life. This is why one pill won't fix anything, that we have to have a strategy, but we have to keep showing up in the boring day to day, doing the thing. Whatever it is, exercise, eating, meal planning, figuring more stuff out. Anytime that we resist the brain's drive to just want to express in this really messy way, we actually cultivate that self-discipline on a neurological level. In other words, we make a map for how our body will and our brain will respond when we get flooded with emotion.
Mm,
And this is why when we see somebody, and we talk about it as emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence is very simply understanding that I cannot always respond to the chemical reactions that are going on in my brain, that anxiety, that anger, that disgust. Okay. I cannot always respond to that. And when I learn that and I follow up with that, then what happens is that I actually create this really beautiful map in the brain on
hmm
how to respond to those emotions. And that looks like self-control. That looks like the person who can be quiet while being yelled at, or can insist that they're not going to be talked to and absolutely look very, very calm and walk away calm and not get offended, not get hijacked, because they have practiced it time and time again so that it's not even something they have to think about anymore. It's just automatic.
mm.
And I would
So
say the
interesting.
same thing exists with meal planning, the same thing
Mhm.
exists with exercise, that we can navigate it where our brain, especially when we're learning how to pay attention to our bodies, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, when I'm working too much, when I'm not working enough in terms of exercise, okay? But when I learn how to lean into that and I get really responsible for that reaction, exercise becomes something that's stress relieving and something
Mhm.
that we look forward to, that is an absolute part of our self-care routine instead of something that we dread.
Mm. I love all of this. And I want to talk about how the confidence piece really works in the brain because I think that there's a lot of power to this. And there is a lot of misconception. And I was one of those. I used to think that people were born with confidence. I just wasn't a confident person. I would tell myself this all of the time. And confidence is like a muscle, you guys. You have to train it. Nobody's just inherently born with it. You have to work at it. And the more you train and the more you work at it, the more it grows. It's not a feeling, right? It is built. It's built from proof. And you build confidence by continuing to stack undeniable evidence and telling yourself or following through with that evidence that you are who you say you are. And it's that proof that we continue to stack upon each other. And we think that we'll finally be confident once we achieve that, look, or we hit that goal number, or we, insert whatever physical goal that we have for ourselves, and we want to base all of our confidence in our appearance. And yes, there is absolutely a part of your physical physique that is wrapped up in your confidence. I'd be lying through my ass if I told you that there wasn't an area of my body that wasn't wrapped up in my physical physique. But my confidence doesn't necessarily come from my physique. My physique is a reflect of my confidence because
Mhm.
it is a reflection of how I continue to show up for myself and continue to do the hard things, even on the days that I don't want to do the things, right? Like I don't always want to get my ass downstairs to the gym to train, but I do. And I show up and I continue to do that, even on the days that I don't want to, or it's not convenient or it's not exciting. And this is where a lot of women struggle because when it's new, it's fun. And we're wrapped up in that, you know what I mean? Just all of the excitement of that new thing again. But the second it starts or it stops becoming as exciting and life be lifing and it throws us the curveballs and we have to pivot. We're not continuing to show up for ourselves. Our needs, again, as Anne had mentioned earlier in the podcast, they just go right to the back burner with the 18 different hats that we tend to wear as females: mom, wife, maid, chauffeur. And so when you continue to stack this evidence, you are continuing to rewire your brain and tell your brain that you are who you say you are. And that's where we start to get these dopamine hits, right? Of even just the small wins. And I really feel like there's nothing wrong with having that really big goal. The big goal of I want to lose 50 pounds. And I'm just throwing it out there.
Mhm.
But if you only get that dopamine hit because you're not satisfied unless you've hit the 50 pounds and you're not celebrating the small wins. It's those small wins along the way that's going to continue to give yourself those hits that you're looking for to rewire. And again, give yourself proof that you are who you say you are. And it's just like the Atomic Habits. If you have not read Atomic Habits, I would highly encourage you to go do so. Such a great book. But it's these small micro things that we do every single day. And maybe that is just starting with drinking 100 ounces of water, these
Mhm.
small things that we can do to be able to continue to stack. And then once we've, mastered that, then we add something on top of that. And then we add something on top of that. And I need you celebrating these things though. I need you like literally high-fiving yourself. Like look at yourself in the mirror and give yourself a freaking high five instead of just sweeping these things underneath the rug because they're not big enough. They're not sexy enough. They're not glamorous enough. And we tend to want to, as females, particularly, we struggle to own these things. And we work with this heavily on our team of, when somebody pays you a compliment or somebody celebrates something, no way will you get away with the whole, oh, thanks, but, right? It's like, no, 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 no. It's like, thank you, Nicole. I fully received that. Owning that hits really different. And this is how you start to rewire what's going on upstairs. And Anne, I just see you shaking your head. So pop off, sis.
All right, so I want to talk about the five regions of the brain responsible for confidence. So we're gonna do a deep dive. The prefrontal cortex is the first one. We've already talked about that. It's helping with self-evaluation, planning, decision making. Then there's the anterior cingulate cortex, and that is responsible for monitoring performance and detecting errors. In other words, it helps us learn from mistakes. We have to have that to be confident people because we have to be able to take in
Mm,
things that help us grow, right? So we have to be able to take in anything that keeps us from our path and our plan. Then the amygdala, which is responsible for fear and threat. Managing what the amygdala is sending out means that I'm not going to get overwhelmed with something that's challenging for me. I'm not going to feel like I'm a bad person or be afraid that other people are going to laugh at me at the gym because I'm actually managing what's occurring with the amygdala. Then the insula, which is responsible for body awareness. This is our gut experience. This is what happens when you go to a provider and your gut says this provider knows what they're talking about or this provider doesn't know what
mm,
we're talking about. And usually it's our amygdala that interferes with that. So when that amygdala is too big and let's say we haven't exercised that prefrontal cortex, that awareness part of us,
mhm.
too much, what happens is that we get really, really scared that we're always in the wrong. And so we'll just do what everybody tells us to do. And that's why social media gets so overwhelming sometimes for people is because they don't have they haven't had that gut experience. They haven't given themselves an opportunity to really focus and harness in on the difference between fear and what I'm sensing internally. And then the last part is the basal ganglia, which is responsible for reward, motivation, and habit formation.
Mm,
So it's actually responsible for positive reinforcement and getting rewards from things. And the reason why we talk about this is that those separate regions of the brain, if we can kind of utilize every single region and pick different things, if you will. Okay, managing my fear. Let's say, for example, I'm afraid that I'm going to go to the gym and look stupid and I'm going to do a lift wrong. Well, guess what? You are. Yeah, it just I'm
own
sure
it.
I still
It's
do
in
it.
you.
I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, okay. I love it when people are like, hey, do it like this. It's like, yeah, I don't know. The very first time I was on a machine at the gym and I had my knees over it and they were supposed to be under it. And somebody comes up and goes, um, can I help? And I was like, yes.
Please.
It was humbling, very, very humbling. I didn't want to show back at the gym for another 48 hours, but you know what? I finished my workout.
Oh.
But every single time that we kind of like we manage different regions of the brain and different kind of like our own different things that we've got to do, these little itty bitty baby habits. And then we don't shame ourselves for getting it wrong. We don't shame ourselves because we don't know how to use an equipment at the gym. We just simply go, well, that was embarrassing. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's done that. Thankfully, somebody helped me. What happens is that we grow in confidence. We grow in our ability to show up really well for ourselves, and we're actually training our brain. Think of your brain like a muscle, just like any body part. If you go to
Hmm.
the gym once and you're like, I'm never doing that again, that was real painful and that was really embarrassing, you got everything that you're going to get from the gym.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people that are like, well, and what we do is we tell ourselves excuses to keep ourselves comfortable. I just don't have a body like that. I just don't have willpower like other people. I just don't have the amount of discipline. Well, yes and no. When you say that, what you're actually doing is you're giving yourself permission to not pursue learning self-discipline. You're actually giving yourself an easy out by saying, "I'm just lazy." No, you're not. No, you're not disciplined. Like you got to show up for that. That isn't intrinsic. We're not born with discipline. No newborn has discipline.
Yep. I love that you are bringing this up because I always, when I work with my clients, I'm always telling them the way that, obviously, the way that we speak to ourselves matters, you guys. And this isn't even just in a, the yes, the way that you speak to yourself with positive thoughts and affirmations. But I hear often, and like Ann said, we want to be able to make excuses because excuses keep us comfortable. So, but Nicole, you don't understand. I was way too busy. I couldn't meal prep. How about we reframe that? And it's like, I didn't prioritize my needs this week to meal prep.
That's
Let's
it.
reframe because the way that you are speaking to yourself matters and it matters a lot. And when you get really open and honest with yourself, you were able to fit in if you added up your screen time, the 3 hours of Netflix that you watched, or the how many minutes and hours that you spent scrolling through TikTok, we were able to fit that in. But yet, for some reason, we were too busy to meal prep. It's no, you did not prioritize that. But the best part of that is when you get really open and honest with yourself, it's usually small tweaks that go a long way in your scheduling and how you're time blocking to be able to fit that meal prep in. But let's call it for what it is before we
Mhm.
start labeling it with every other excuse out there. But yeah, and pop off because I saw you like, yep, yep.
I wanted a side note. There are weeks that we get so busy. You're leaving at 5 and you're not getting home until 10, where it's
Yeah.
just about impossible to get things done. And I just wanted to offer that for those type A's out there that are like, really, have you seen my life? However, is that if that is how you are living your life, you are in the body that you are prioritizing. Just want to throw that out there. Because what's happening is that you're letting your life be run by other commitments. You're saying yes too often and
Not prioritizing
no
your
too
needs.
much to yourself, and we got to say yes to ourselves eventually. And I love to call this out because I am a big advocate of what is known as positive procrastination. In other words, I'm going to do all of these things that are more enjoyable for me before I show up and do this one thing that I don't really like to do. And then I will say, I'm too busy and I don't have time for this, when actually all I just did is kept myself busy. I can always clean the garage. Let's be honest. I can do laundry at any point of the day, but I don't want to sit down and do my taxes. Why am I going to meal plan? That's kind of boring, right? Like, or I don't really want to do that one thing that I've been avoiding for the past 2 years. Like, yeah, you've been avoiding it on purpose, but you filled up your life with a whole bunch of tasks to feel better about it. And let's just be honest with ourselves instead of lying. That's exactly what you're doing. So please don't come at us and tell us that you're actually really busy when really what's happening is that you aren't busy enough for you. You haven't ever put yourself first, and you are living a life and in a body where you have been the very last priority your most of time, your entire life.
I love feisty, sassy Anne. I do. I like her a lot. That's a mic drop moment right there because yes, you guys, we're all busy and yes, we all have commitments and priorities. But as Anne said, when you're not showing up for yourself, you're allowing everything else to keep you, allowing you everything else to keep you busy instead of reprioritizing. And I promise you, when you start to shift and you start showing up for yourself first, watch all of those other things that fall behind just become effortless to, check off
Yes,
that to-do list. Becomes
yes.
so much more easier. Oh my gosh, Nicole, you can talk. So much easier to manage and it doesn't feel as overwhelming and it doesn't feel as daunting when you start to show up and prioritize yourself. It's crazy how that happens. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, and this is probably another podcast episode, but we actually get energy from exercise. We get
Oh,
energy from eating well. And it is so different if you're spending your day on protein bars and protein shakes, and that is a majority of your breakfast and lunch, and maybe you get an apple here and there, and then you have a good dinner. Your energy is not coming as good from those calories because they're not quality nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to overwhelm you. I'm not trying to take away your protein drinks or your protein bars. I'm trying to say that we've got to reprioritize because you're going to feel like something that sat on a shelf for 12 months. That's what a protein bar can do. That's what a protein drink can do versus something that's going to go bad in a week. We're going to get a lot of different nutrients and a lot more energy from a much more balanced nutrients. Same thing with exercise. The number of people that I hear say, I'm just too tired. If your testosterone's low, please go get that adjusted. But if it is adjusted and you're still, I'm too tired, I just can't wake up in the morning. Here's a really fun trick, a psychological trick that I want you to do. Instead of saying I can't, I want you to say I won't. And I want you
Mm-hmm.
to do that on purpose because when we say out loud what's actually occurring, it creates a desire to actually resolve that cognitive dissonance. When we say I won't go and do this, then we're like, is that the type of person I want to be? Do I want to be the person who makes up excuses and says I'm not going to do that? I mean, maybe you do. But for a lot of us, we don't like saying I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. We
We would have
don't.
we
No.
would rather have a reason why we're not the bad person.
Yeah. I can't get up in the morning. I'm too tired is completely different than I won't get up in the morning to set my day up for success. Those hit very, very, very differently.
And how many of us say, and I've heard this, and I have been in these moments too, where we say, well, I can't get up in the morning because I'm too tired because I work so late. And then when I'm home from work, I'm so tired from work. And then I have to make dinner and I have to get the kids here and there and I have to do laundry. And there's just really no time. The only time I can go is on the weekends, but on the weekends, I'm exhausted from the week. And I've got chores and I've got other things I got and grocery shopping. Guys, we got it. You are smart. You are capable. You can do hard things. We can figure this out. Don't let your life be a constant series of excuses that keeps you from living in the body that you want and feeling proud of yourself.
Yep, 100%. So if we were to wrap this up, you guys, on what it looks like to rewire and remap your brain and to ultimately get to a place where we're rebuilding confidence that as hormones start to decline is happening naturally, but you have so much power to combat all of these things. That's the best part. Like you're truly in the driver's seat. Is I would say step one is going to be to calm your nervous system, really understanding what that looks like. That's going to be through your breath work, through moving your body, through strength training, through your nutrition, through better sleep. How you choose to live your lifestyle is a direct reflection of your nervous system.
Hmm.
Point blank, end of story. So if you're constantly living off of 3 hours of sleep because you're scrolling your phone until 3 a.m. with TikTok and you live off of, like Ann said, protein shakes and bars because you know you need more protein, but you're not prioritizing, having whole foods available and prepping those sources, and you're too tired to get your movement in, let alone show up at the gym to strength train, yeah, your body's going to feel like absolute rubbish and dog doo doo. So that would be the first step, is really looking at this, and not even from like a overwhelm, I've got to change everything. But what are these small things, which would be step two, keeping those small promises, right? So it could be today, my promise to myself is that I'm going to walk for 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes at once. I can break this into two 15-minute walks. I can break this into three 10-minute walks, but I am going to walk for 30 minutes out of my day, come hell or high water. And I'm going to do that every single day this week. That is the one small promise I have made to myself. And I am going to make sure that I am intentional and I prioritize making this happen. Step three is going to be the way that you talk to yourself, because it matters and it matters a lot. So talking to yourself kindly, owning these wins when they do happen, and truly being able to, like, look at yourself in the mirror. It's like if you look at yourself every single day in the mirror and you talk to yourself like you're a one and you're a POS and you don't deserve and you're not worthy, who do you think you're going to show up like? How do you think you're training your brain to act and execute accordingly, right? And so
Yes.
even if it's one of those fake it till you make it kind of things, own it, sometimes it's like, own it before you become it type of thing, and the belief comes after the evidence, however you want to frame it. But if you have to pretend to be a 10, therefore pretend to be a 10. Talk to yourself like you're a 10. Talk to yourself as if you're that person. What would this person do? And therefore we start to act accordingly as that person would act. And then, Anne, I'm going to get your thoughts. I want to get through this list. And then step four, if you please, you guys, when it comes to hormone optimization and you have not looked into support here, please, 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 please. I know Anne says all the time, you will be prying hormones out of my cold hands on my deathbed before I stop
Yes,
taking these because they truly are a huge piece of how your body functions. And this is what kept you vital and ticking for 20, 30 years of your life. So if you're mid 40s, in your 50s, feeling like absolute dog doo doo, yes, your lifestyle plays a huge role. There's no better way to optimize your hormones than your lifestyle. But these hormones, they're gone. They've packed up, they exit, and they're leaving the building. And your body relies on them to function in the way that it is. So working with a team who truly understands the female body metabolism hormones, working with a provider who is a hormone expert, this is what they went to school for, this is what they specialize in, is going to be a night and day difference in working with a generic PCP OBGYN. And there are some out there. There are some. Don't get me wrong. There are some that truly do understand and all providers want to help. I'm not saying that providers are out there and they don't want to help, but again, they just
of
don't know
course.
what they don't know. And this is exactly why we've added a hormone optimization team to our team because it has quite literally made a night and day difference in how we uh, how we coach as a coaching team, but how the results that our clients are able to get. Because when you feel good, everything else from there is a trickle effect.
Hmm.
Anything to
One,
add to that, Anne?
yes, I just wanted to say one thing. I love the fact that you covered how to talk to yourself. One little trick is that if you can't get behind saying you look amazing, you got the like really work on the encouragement piece.
Mm-hmm.
You can do hard things. I got this today. And if those tasks are too big for you, if thinking of 30 minutes of walking is too much, do 10. If for your during your lunch break, go for a walk during a portion of it. It doesn't have to be impossible. And if it feels impossible, keep breaking it down and then just keep celebrating those little wins. Good for you. I did it. I got it done. Not, well, that was only 10 minutes. That just sucks. I'm never going to get to where I want to go. Um, think of yourself like your own best friend and start talking to yourself like your own best friend.
Yep. And I want you guys to, too, when you go into this, normalize that it's going to feel weird in the very beginning to do this. It is going to feel so weird to look at yourself in the mirror and pay yourself positive comments opposed to, ugh, there's that wrinkle and this gray hair and this. And, we just tend to pick ourselves apart. So when you are intentional about, shifting the way that you talk to yourself and you're intentional about these words, it feels really, really, really weird in the very beginning, you guys. So just anticipate that it might feel even slightly just slimy. It did for me in the very beginning when I started. And I'm more than just, because yes, positive affirmations is one thing without the follow through. It's a completely different story. So, but it felt slimy for me in the very beginning. And so it took a while and it took a lot of consistency. And this is the other part is like, you don't get to do this twice a week and be like, well, I am, and it's not working. This is a daily thing that you have to start
Yes.
to implement. It's not like the kind of sort of, we tend to take this, well, I do it a couple times and then I get busy and I forget and all these things. And then then you show up in my DMs and I'm speaking to nutrition right now. Like it's not working, but it's the same concept here. It's like if we're not consistent, as Anne said, this particularly when it comes to the brain rewiring, it thrives off of consistency. This is exactly how you remap your thoughts, and your thoughts impact your actions, and your actions impact your outcome.
Hmm. Love it.
That's my mic drop moment.
Honorary therapist right there.
Yes, yes. And I'm pretty excited. So we haven't talked about this, but Anne's going to be out here. What is it, 3 weeks?
Yes.
She's come to visit Utah for the first time, so I'm going to show her all around. And girlfriend's an outdoor nature lover, and we're going to do all the hikes. Might be slight, like I'm hoping it's beginning of November. We still have some fall colors here because fall is like the absolute best in Utah. Like it's so good here. I'm so excited to have you. But we're going to do some in studio podcasts together. So if you guys have topics, or we'll probably do another Q&A. We got a lot of really great feedback from the Q&A. They loved that, and so we'll
Uh-huh.
definitely be doing another Q&A. But if you guys have any topics or things that you guys want to discuss when she's here, and we've never like podcast together. I mean, we podcast together, but we've never podcast in the same room together. So I'm super excited about that. So with that being said, you guys, if you guys listen to this full episode, you get to the end, please drop comments. We always love, as far as like ideas, I'm always looking for podcast ideas. So
Mm.
anything that you guys have, I would truly appreciate the feedback there, and you can drop it in the comments in Spotify or Apple, or you could also always DM me directly. But the other part of this too is if you're ready to rebuild your confidence from the inside out and not through another restrictive cookie cutter BS plan with working with people who don't truly understand how to serve a female going through menopause, and you are in a place where you're ready to tackle this, the application for the one-on-one coaching will also be linked in the bio. So thanks, you guys. As always, we appreciate all of the support that you guys have, all the reviews, but we will see you guys in the next episode.